Some people have whole relationships just drunk the whole time. Like they don't even know. I've seen that.
No, it's funny because it's
they
true.
only
it's just
because they
hilarious.
met drinking, which is fine. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
And then they only go out for drinks,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's just the whole thing. They get married. I've known couples that basically they didn't know each other sober.
And one of them goes to like AA, and they're like, I don't feel like I don't even know you anymore.
Kind of, because then there's the pressure to keep whatever that facade is up. So like, oh, let's have some drinks, and eventually you're like, your synaptic vesicles are going crazy. You've just been drinking the whole time without really being an alcoholic. You know, you're just doing it out of a weird conditioning.
Well, drinking dulls your senses. I mean, the reason why I mostly quit drinking, I mean, like I said, I'll have a drink every now and then. I don't see anything wrong with it. But like, the reason why I mostly quit is because I had really bad social anxiety in college, and I would drink before going to like acting classes and stuff like that, because I was going to school for theater, and for whatever reason, I moved to Chicago, and it was like somebody just hit the pipeline and social anxiety exploded. And so I would drink like 4 shots.
Wow.
Like I had a drinking
I think
problem.
I did that before, like job interviews sometimes.
Sure.
You know.
But in I would get in the shower, and I'd feel really good because you feel like this warmth in your chest.
Yeah.
And I would squirt toothpaste in my mouth and just munch it up. And like, but people can still smell it coming out of your head.
I don't think there's anything.
Yeah.
Is there any? I heard like shaving cream or something does something.
You put shaving cream in your mouth?
No, you put like on your face. If you just shaved, the shaving cream and the aftershave would overtake the alcohol. Fumes. They're fumes.
Well,
basically.
I would chew gum and do all this stuff, and they would smell it just coming out of my head, and then like I'd be like a Mortal Kombat villain. And I remember somebody. I was so dumb at the time. Somebody was like, "Smells like somebody in here has been drinking." Like one of the kids said that, and I was like, "That's weird," but it was like me. And I remember we had this class called Body Movement, and the teacher came up to me and she pointed to my chest and she goes, "Don't hate yourself," which was really weird. And that's like whenever I was like, "Do I hate myself?" I was like, "I don't think so." But in college, you're so anti-vulnerable, you're like, you hate yourself,
right?
You know what I mean? Like you don't want to like deal with those feelings or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was like, that was kind of like the genesis story. I was like, okay, maybe I need to go to therapy.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which,
yes, well, this is a self-help survivor.
Yeah.
For self-help addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, it's kind of like, I feel like we do live in a self-help culture now in a way, because like people used to read self-help books. But now the majority of social media, if it's not political, it's either political or it's like some sort of self-help. Because it's like, cut off the toxic people in your life. All these memes, like the people who are really going to be there for you are going to be there for you all the time. Doesn't matter the hour of the day. And you're like, okay, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah. No boundaries.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure. But I feel like that's kind of we're kind of all into self-help now, because it's sort of the part of the social media thing, don't you think?
Right. Well, it's kind of, it's just in the zeitgeist. I mean, wellness is in, also we live in LA where it's like there's a lot of like it's a business, it's an industry, you know, yoga and acupuncture or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I started going to therapy here.
Same.
Like a few years ago.
I started in Chicago, but it was when I was about to move out here that I was already,
because
like,
I met a bunch of
gearing
people
up,
that did therapy, and then I went through a phase in my life. I had a lot of depression. I was having a bit, like, not panic attacks, but something adjacent to that. And there was a number on the back of my covered California card. I called it. Yeah. And the first thing they ask you is like, are you going to kill yourself? And I was like, well, if I say yes, will I get the thing? Like, are you gonna proceed if I say yes? You know?
Or are they gonna like come and like kick your windows open like a SWAT team?
Yeah.
And be like, you know.
And that's when I started going to there. We did like CBT therapy.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah,
you have the definition on your phone, right?
Right, I do. Actually, be careful when you look up CBT, because there's a porn that's CBT. It's cock and ball torture.
That's weird.
So you don't want to confuse it with that.
See, that's why porn is like ruined us.
Yeah, it just really infiltrates everything. But I thought, it was like, oh, cool, it's CBT porn. I was like, oh, all right, it's CBT
it's like
porn.
Change your brain while also ruining it.
Yeah. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a form of psychological treatment that has been demonstrated to be effective for a range of problems, including depression, anxiety disorders, alcohol and drug use problems, marital problems, eating disorders, and severe mental illness. It's a psychosocial intervention that aims to reduce symptoms of various mental health conditions, primarily depression and anxiety disorders. So to me, that sounds like all therapy. But there's principles of it. 3 principles. Core beliefs. Our core beliefs are informed by our childhood experiences. Dysfunctional assumptions, which I think I really had. Humans tend to hold on to negative more easily than the positive. And automatic negative thoughts. I kind of feel like I have all these.
Ants is what they call them.
Yeah.
What the way I had it explained to me was like, you have these fears or these distortions in life, right? Mm-hmm. And then so what you end up doing is, okay, I got to reprogram these beliefs. So the cognitive, then there's the behavioral, then the therapy part. So like the cognitive would be like, I can't get on stage in front of people. Mm-hmm. So you would work on kind of changing the belief first a little bit, like cognitively, and then you would take baby steps behaviorally towards getting on stage. Like, okay, I'm going to give a presentation in front of one person. You do that till it feels comfortable while giving yourself positive reinforcement. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to get on stage in front of 2 or 3 people. Mm-hmm. Then you feed yourself the reinforcement till you keep climbing the hierarchy to where these things, it's like desensitizing yourself in a good way. Mm-hmm. So like when people are like desensitized to violence, it's because they've exposed themselves to it so much. So you desensitize yourself from the fear or the depression or the whatever, to where your brain just automatically responds positively or neutral, you know, to where you don't have like that negative charge.
Yeah. Your heartbeat is kind of stable in that environment.
Totally. You're not like, you don't see a girl and you're like, "Ugh!"
Yeah.
You know.
Did your therapist do like, she tried to find all the cognitive blocks you had? Like, that's kind of what mine did.
You know what was interesting was the first therapist that I had, I actually found a cognitive behavioral therapy program that I went through on my own. And I kind of brought that into my therapy because it was already written by a therapist. I was like, I want to work on this. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it was talk therapy, but we worked kind of through the steps together.
I see.
At the time. And at the time, I was drinking a lot to numb my stimulus to like things that freaked me out. So I was learning to get off of alcohol by using, I wasn't addicted to alcohol, but I was headed there, if that makes sense. But by using the therapy. To, you know.
My therapy was mostly just for like my magical thinking, my negative, like, oh, well, this is not going to work. Anything that I did would not work out. Like that was, I feel like that could have just been how I was raised. Like my parents were kind of like that. Of course it was. And eventually it started infiltrating. Because like my family, like we definitely didn't grow up poor, but we lived like poor people. You know, like my parents had money.
You had these views about money then.
Yeah, we were always kind of living like the heat was never on. You know, it was always kind of like, oh, we got to be scared because of the money, you know.
Yeah.
And it's only like when I was an adult, I looked back, I was like, my parents had jobs and they made money. They had things. They owned duplexes.
Do you think that somewhat made you a little more self-sufficient though? In some ways to where you went out and you're like, I got to make things happen.
But the problem is when you raise a child like that, it gives you an extreme poverty mindset to the point that I was just doing all like, I remember when I moved to New York, I like wasn't even feeding myself, or I would find something on the street, like in the bed bug epidemic, like I'll use this hamper I found on the street instead of buying one from Target for $7. You know what I mean? Yeah. And eventually I started like manifesting into shoplifting. I started like just stealing groceries.
And you never brought this to your therapist though?
No, I never talked, because like that wasn't the problem. That was just like a result of the problem. I didn't want, and I knew it was something that I wanted to stop, and I was going to stop, and I didn't want that to be what the therapy is about, you know?
Right, and plus she might have reported you, be like, my client
I don't think she
was
would
at
have.
Target today, and
I never stole enough. I think you have to steal like thousands of dollars worth.
You
for
stole
them
like full like grocery carts.
Full groceries.
Dude, that is so crazy.
I found it was good for like my acting career. It was that I was going in, and I was like, just to maintain that poker face, stuff the bags. You have to really act like you're like you own the place to get away with it. Sometimes I go on audition where I have to wear a suit. Of like, this is the perfect getup to wear to go steal a bunch of groceries. No one's gonna. I would just stuff the bags and just pick up the bags, and I would do a walk. I would go from one side of the self checkout, and then I would walk by all the cashiers.
Sure.
Like on the other side, so it looks like I paid for it. They wouldn't, because why would I be walking if I'm not trying to sneak away?
And the alarms would go off?
No, never. Alarms only go off if you steal like alcohol, I think, because they have like a thing on them. But I have stolen ties before. I had to get a tie.
Like neckties?
Yeah. It was like expensive tie. It was like
tie people.
It was like
I stole a family.
Human trafficking. I stole I stole a tie from some store. It was like a $285 tie. And as I was going through, the thing went off.
That's an expensive tie.
It's an expensive tie. And fuck them. I'm glad I stole it. So then I'm going through the thing and it goes off. But I just ignored it, and somebody was coming at the same time. I still held the door open. Like, you just have to act like you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you'll get away with it. I did it for years. I just kept stealing and stealing and stealing. Whole things of groceries. I stole video games. I stole recorders, stole equipment. I stole a PlayStation 3. I was stealing all this stuff, and but it all started with just like groceries. And what ended up happening is I afforded myself a lifestyle. Like, I was stealing like $20 almond butter and like a lot of kombuchas. Like,
right, so you were living the life of like Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Basically, I was like, I can't go back. I can't afford to.
You're like, I can't eat Jiffy peanut butter. I got to eat the like non-hydrogenated oil stuff.
Like, it would be so like nothing to me. Like, I'd be driving somewhere. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to get a kombucha. I would stop. I'd park. I'd run in the Ralphs, take a kombucha, and just run out. Like, it was like that easy to do.
Did you ever start to and you didn't feel guilty at all?
I never felt guilty. No, because I'd only steal from like Ralph's or Best Buy. I didn't steal like from a guy's house. You
weren't like stealing from friends or anything.
No,
like that.
no, never anything like that.
I guess it's your frame of rep. For me, like, I have like such a high value on loyalty or rather honesty.
Yeah.
That I would feel guilt, and that's not a judgment. I'm just saying, I would feel guilty. It would eat me alive. You know what I mean?
In the beginning, a little bit, but I had such a poverty mindset in the beginning of this. I kind of need to do this.
You think the root thing that needed to collapse was your poverty mindset?
You think
that's what kind of led you to something? Because, it's easy to vilify the rich, you know what I mean? And be like, I'm like Robin Hood, you know what I mean?
Right,
These people are making so much money
Except
anyways.
I wasn't giving it to anybody else.
So, like, what was therapy, you think, the thing that made you stop doing that?
No, I kept doing it, but the work and therapy about the other stuff kind of helped. Honestly, what ended up happening, ironically, when the pandemic happened and everybody was stealing, like, it was kind of a normal
You're
thing.
Contrarian.
No, I was doing a lot of mushrooms. I was doing mushrooms like 3 times a week, like it was my job, because I had nothing else to do. And something in one of the trips, it just turned off whatever that was. I never stole again. It was literally like overnight.
Would you feel guilty if you stole, or is it just kind of like one of those things?
I would try. I was like, I guess I can steal this. It was because of the muscle memory of it,
Like,
and I would get an extreme like anxiety, like, I can't do it. I just can't do it, And it just went away. Yeah.
So when you were saying I just can't do it, was it a conscious thing? Like,
it was a bit of a conscious thing.
This is immoral.
Mixed with fear, mixed with, I was like, even though I never got caught for this shit, it was like, I'm going in some direction I really don't want to go in doing this,
Yeah.
I get like kind of a quit while you're ahead type of thing.
Gotcha.
I was like, I don't want to have kids and I'm a father and I'm stealing.
Yeah, you're like, hey, kids, like, I just want you to act like nothing's going on.
Especially when I didn't have to.
The Kool-Aid. And then he's like, I want that G.I. Joe. You're like, take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and it just reminded me of my parents weren't stealing at all, but it was a thing like, I don't have to be doing this.
It's not even just like a morally like patting yourself on the back, like, I don't steal. It's more so, I think, like, it sets up a bad circuit in your brain because you start to think of
you start to become entitled.
You start to become entitled,
yeah,
and you start to think that there's no price for things that I want.
Yeah,
which I think a lot of people in our society now, they're like, and this is not a political comment on Jeff Bezos, like, at all.
Right.
It's more so just like when people are like so mad at like billionaires, it's almost like a level of, well, I want to have, like, my parents stopped giving me money, so these people need to give me money.
Right,
or whatever.
A little bit like that,
and so it's kind of like this thing, like, you start to think that there's no price tag in life. Like, to get anything that you want on some level, you have to suffer. Like, even if you want like a good relationship, you still kind of have to suffer for that relationship, because there's times when your partner's going to upset you, and you can't just like walk out the door and be like, yeah, I'm going to get a pack of smokes, and then you drive to like Oregon.
Right.
So I think it's like, after a while, it starts to make you think that what you desire is free and there's no price tag
Yeah.
of like pain. And you're a disciplined person.
Very
but
much.
I'm just saying, I think that it could have eventually maybe
Well, the
eroded
stealing.
that.
Well, here's the
You know
thing:
what
the
I'm
stealing became part of my discipline. I was like, on my way
Right.
to an
I can see
audition.
that.
On the way, I was like, I got to make sure I go and I steal a chocolate bar on the way. So
Yeah.
like that'll warm me up.
Yeah. That was kind of what I had with my thing that I was doing too. Is like you get disciplined about doing a weird thing because you're afraid everything else is going to collapse. It's like an OCD thing.
No, but that's the magical thing. That's what I was going to therapy for. It is an OCD thing. It's magical thinking where something completely unrelated to something else you feel like is affecting it. So I was like, oh, if I don't steal this thing, I'm not going to get this job. It makes no sense, you know?
Right.
So it just becomes part of your ritual, and that's kind of what I was working on in the CBT therapy. That's why I didn't want to bring in like, hey, by the way, I'm doing these really terrible things. That's like, you know, it'll just worry her. Like I was like, I'll just keep this.
Yeah, there's certain things you sometimes don't want to tell your therapist just because it's like, okay, I'm not ready to deal with this yet. Like I remember there was one time I quit my job. And I didn't want to tell my therapist because I knew what she was going to tell me. Like, why did you do that? This is a pattern in your life. Yeah. And I just didn't want to deal with that. You know what I mean? But yeah, I did CBT too. I started whenever I was in Chicago. So it was like right at the end of college. But for me, what was interesting was like I started because I was drinking to like numb things, but I was doing like comedy and acting back then.
Right.
But when I started doing comedy, this weird thing started happening where the words would get stuck in my chest because I was so nervous. Like if I didn't drink, I'd be
wow. You
like
didn't trust yourself at all.
It was bad, dude. It got really, really bad because it was like just a whole like cascade of just anxiety like washing over you. And then what ended up happening was I got a scholarship for acting, but I could not act in my classes, so I had to drink before I would go in there and I would act and stuff. Yeah. So I started studying CBT and all this stuff, and I started going after my fears. Eventually, I quit drinking. I got off all the meds that I was on, all that. But what happened was I went to LA, and I started like that familiar feeling kind of came back in auditions. Not really so much stand-up,
right.
but in auditions.
Any high-pressure
situation.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, what's my number one fear in life? And I looked back at all the times that I felt the most inadequate in life, and the most inadequate that I ever felt was whenever I was around girls. Because I would see a girl, and I would just act like I had no interest in her whatsoever because it was like the ultimate rejection. And I think a lot of dudes somewhat feel this way, but in my mind I was like, okay, if I can conquer women, then I wasn't saying that consciously, like I want to conquer women,
but yeah, you go like it's like Batman with the bats. It's
with
like
the bats,
if I can do my number one fear, everything else should be easy.
Everything else will fall into line, right? So I remember I would get in these, I was like in like online dating and stuff, and I had been in a few relationships, but what happened was I got in a relationship, long story short, girl I love, she cheated. And then all of a sudden, I remember I was like, okay, I have to look at maybe why she cheated. Am I not a man enough? Did she think I was like weak? What were all these different feelings or whatever? So what I did was I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and I am going to learn to talk to women. So first I started going on dates, like on Tinder or whatever, but I'd be like too nervous to like kiss the girl or whatever like that. So I'd go on like 5 dates with the same chick and I would like never make a move. And so I was like, okay, how do I get over this? So I was like, all right, well, I'm terrified to go up to a girl in public and talk to her. So I started making myself approach 5 women a day, like 5 women. And I had to ask for the number. Okay. And if I didn't ask for the number,
would you just be like, "Can I have your number?" Or would you have to like?
I'd like just pop up and be like, "I need your number," and then I would run away.
Yeah.
No. What happened was I would basically like invite them to a comedy show or whatever, and it was sincere.
Okay.
I was sincerely inviting these women to comedy shows, and most of them I wasn't even trying to hit on. I just wanted to get over my fear
breaking the ice.
Yeah. So I would start doing that, and like when I first started doing it, I remember like my hand was like shaking, and the phone was like shaking my hand, and my eye was like twitching because I was like so nervous, like like a tweaker.
Yeah.
And then what happened was
just gave you the number out of sheer intimidation. They're like, all right.
I started getting good at it to where I would like if I'd see a girl walking on the street I get out of my car and I just go up to her and start talking to her.
Wow. And what would you say when you?
I would just be like, hey, be like, sorry, I saw you walking, blah 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 blah, and I try to be funny.
I guess that's kind of flattering too.
In the end, I would give them like my phone and be like, yeah, put your number in there.
Yeah.
And most of the time they would, but then there were some days where like all 5 women would be like, no. But most of the time I would get the number because I just got good at talking to girls, and so. What ended up happening was I started to just go out and just try to meet women. No ulterior motive, anything. And I started to like hook up a lot. And like first it was a little bit, then it was a lot, then I lost count, and then I started doing that all the time. But what started happening was much like the shoplifting thing. I thought that this was going to fix those insecurities. And what happened was I got really confident with women, but I actually started to like regress in my development.
Like just because, normal human interaction.
You think you sleep with a lot of women, it's going to make you feel good. But then like I had this other set of values over here to where I'm like, okay, well, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I believe like certain things about life and about like valuing other people and stuff. But yet I'm doing this thing.
Right.
And I was never mean. I was never, I never lied about my intentions.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like doing this thing that I know is not healthy for me. It's not healthy for other people. And I'm doing it over and over. And then eventually I had to be like, okay, why do I need to do this to feel okay with myself? And it got to the point where I couldn't even be in a relationship.
Wow.
Because if a girl liked me, deep down, I didn't like me. So I would not like her anymore. You know what I mean? Because so it didn't really address the problem. But what it did show me is that whatever you fear, there's a strategy to get over the fear, but don't think that fear is going to fix every other area.
Well, it's kind of like a paradox. So you got very good at this thing with women, but now you're bad at the thing behind it. Whereas maybe ironically, you would have been better at the thing behind it if you didn't conquer the thing in front of it so badly.
Yeah, and the other thing too was like, I said I didn't lie, which I didn't about my intentions, but I'd lie with my behavior. You know how to, once you get good at hooking up, you know how to like hold your posture. You know how to like kind of say things and do things. And it's like very manipulative. Like the whole thing is like really, really manipulative. And to where you're not really honest anymore and you're not really being like, you're not really showing your true self.
Yeah.
Which nobody needs to do that on the first date.
Yeah.
You don't show let go of your whole poker face. But at the same time,
some people do. And that's why I think we have online dating kind of ruined that, because more people are going on dates than ever and less people are in relationships than ever. That's another paradox that's going on. Yeah. And a big part of it is that you used to meet somebody organically and they kind of already liked you and then you would ease into it. Now it's like you're meeting strangers and you're like, okay, this is me. You're like, I love Marvel, and and they're like, okay, I don't like, well, I gotta find someone who accepts me. I was like, yeah, but you wouldn't do this if you happened to meet somebody through a friend at what I mean? You wouldn't. It would just naturally kind of happen,
Totally.
I guess the bigger question is, am I gonna do therapy forever, even if I don't feel like I need it? Like I kind of look at it. I look at it like a luxury. It's like just an extra person you're talking to. Because there are some times where I feel fine for a long time. And she's like, okay, well, and is what's going on? And I'm just kind of trying to reach into anything that bothers me and bring it up. I was like, is this really helpful that I'm bringing, like it's not really bothering me that much. I'm making it a thing now just to get the value of this session because the copay is low. But
yeah, it felt like just going to confessional each week after a while, to where I was like, I don't have anything new to tell you. Like we're just kind of like looking at each other and I'm like, how was your week? And then I'm like, okay, it's time for me to stop coming here because this is just turning into a date.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because, like, I don't know, when you look at your ideal future, is therapy really in it,
I mean, I think different points in your life, it's, like, good. Because the thing is, like, when it's time to get a therapy, like, I know people who are always like, this person wasn't there for me. But then you find out that they're always complaining. Like, no matter how close you are to someone, there comes a point when you got to go to therapy if you're always complaining. Because if you're always complaining, nobody's going to want to be around you. I don't care.
You need to pay somebody
whether it's
hundreds
your
of
mom,
dollars.
your kids, whatever. Like, no one. Eventually, you have to be like, okay, I'm toxic, and I got to find a way to not be, because my whole energy is just off. I like the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy, but kind of being your own therapist, being like, consistently being like, what do I fear? How do I attack it? and how do I get over this fear, and just keep stretching yourself.
Yeah.
But that's more of a way of a life than seeing an actual therapist. But there is, I think, also like value in like leaving yourself alone, because you can get to the point to where you're always working on yourself so much that turns you into a weirdo.
Yeah.
And now kind of where I'm at is like I sort of feel solid with myself and like with my faith and with what I believe, to where I can kind of just relax about stuff, you know? But I still like the idea of looking at something that fears you within reason. I mean, you don't want to be like, yeah, I'm fearful to beat my wife, so I'm gonna start doing that.
Yeah, you want to kind of like not beat her because you don't want to beat anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, not because of some consequence.
I was scared, and Tony Robbins told me to stretch myself.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
So yeah, and I also find there's like different things, because sometimes I might get more out of going for a massage than I would out of therapy, or I might get more out of, you know what I mean, like going to the gym or walking my dog for like 3 hours. Like it's kind of like it's a different, and that's another thing that made the magical thinking hard, is whenever I find like a new thing that like, oh, this kind of helps my, like, okay, now I got to include that into the, you know, it's like there's only so many hours in a day I can't do,
dude,
you know, every single thing that I feel like helps me before some tasks. I'm like, oh, I got to do all this before I go to the post office. You know?
Yeah, dude. I was doing this specific therapy recently. I did it for 2 years. It helped me a ton, like better than any other form of therapy. And I was working with someone with it. And it was like a life coach type situation. And I was praying one day, and I was like, I feel like I'd be better off if I gave this up. And so but I didn't want to. So like when I gave it up, I was like, ugh. And then for 2 weeks, I felt like I was going insane without this thing. And then I was like, oh, I was like addicted to that thing to where I had to do it. Like it goes back to the thing, to where that thing is now slavery. Yeah. Because you have to do this specific thing in this specific order, or else you feel like your life is going to crumble, which is just BS.
Well, it's not that you feel like your life is going to crumble. You're just going to feel like if it crumbles, it was your fault. Because sometimes, you know, shit happens, things go wrong, you fail. It could happen, but there's the extra thing. I was like, you know, but this happened because I didn't do those things in that order, that when I knew what I knew, you know, it's like.
So yeah, I guess that would be the cons then, right? The cons would be like, it's another thing that you're addicted to, which means that there's a thing behind the thing, you know, which I guess you got to find a way to deal with that, which is like, sometimes just quitting everything for a while and just living, and then like letting go of the steering wheel and coasting for a little bit is the best thing you can do. But some people make that a way of life, and those people also end up in trouble too. Yeah. So guys, make sure you subscribe. Also, leave us a good review, because it helps. It boosts us up. Please leave a comment.
Unless you didn't like it, then don't. Then
just don't say anything. Yeah. Don't be like
just
rude.
Send me a mean message, and I'll take the hit.
You can send me a mean message too. So either one of us, whichever one.
We go to therapy. We're fine.